by Mirror Gallery, which is a virtual space where art and creative works are enjoyed. The goal of the site is to connect people with art and culture and to put financial resources in the hands of creatives. Mirror Gallery is a collaboration between Banded Purple and Studio Brutus, and they created the gallery in response to the pandemic and lack of physical spaces for artists. It's incredibly exciting and inspiring to see everything that's coming out of Mirror, and it's wonderful to be here. So thank you for having me. I really do believe that we must continue to look to artists and their work as we navigate our new realities. And speaking of new or alternative realities, Winnie's exhibition, Wimmin Who Wander, provides a beautiful space for us to reflect and even dream, I would say. So her show opened at Mirror Gallery on May 29th. So Winnie, it's wonderful to be here with you.
Thank you for having me, and thank you again, like Banded Purple and Studio Brutus, for setting up a platform during this very strange time. Yeah,
absolutely. So for those who might be new to your work, can you talk about your practice and the medium in which you work?
Yeah, I mean, over the years, my work has really been grounded in sort of the act of drawing. So starting with colored pencils on paper, I used to do these large-scale drawings that were very meditative and meticulous and sort of circling around portraiture and different conversations of beauty and normality and how we code images and femininity. And since then, it's sort of evolved into all these different sort of ways of drawing, I guess. So now what you're looking at in the show are these sort of cutout paper pieces / dioramas. So it's beyond just sort of the static drawing. It's this sort of three-dimensional, lush space and world.
And these works you created before the pandemic?
Yeah, I mean, the pandemic has really affected sort of my household in a different way. I think I have a 22-month-old, and we're both artists. So in a way, because of the lack of access to like resources of drop-in centers and being able to see our support networks, it's really relegated one of us, me, to be the caregiver, because we're lucky enough in our household that my partner like still has his work at his formal job at an artist-run center. So it's strange times, but I'm grateful for, I'll be able to look back on the amount of family time we've been sort of allotted beyond our parental leave. And, it's a little bit of a sacrifice for our sort of creative endeavors, but I don't know, I think it'll be fruitful in the long run because a lot of weird shit is happening in the world that's upsetting, and the pandemic coupled with the Black Lives Matter movement, it's all gonna get distilled through our artists' visions and become something else at the end of this or throughout. So for me, this is more of a period where a lot of ideas and emotions are percolating rather than the act of making.
Well, and that is, I think, really important for artists, right? It's the idea that we expect artists to be constantly putting out.
Absolutely.
But there's this idea that, of course, to put out work, you need to take in the world around you. And so.
Yeah. And I think having just a small person in mind who's growing every day and observing just, all things big and small in such a pure, unfiltered manner. Like I get to see the world through his eyes and, digest what's happening at different levels. Yeah, it's like the exhaustion and fatigue and fear of what's going on is sort of threefold when you're an artist and a caregiver and, all of this.
Absolutely. Can you talk about where the title of your exhibition comes from, and I guess the significance of using the word women?
Yeah, so, women, creatures, it's sort of a title we use to exclude, I guess, allusions to the patriarchy. So for me, women, it also has its own sort of category and genus as a sort of animalistic thing that exists in my imagination outside of our own reality. So these women exist outside the existence of men. And so you can see in the works that these women also birth their own environments and create their own surroundings. So you don't see kind of where their worlds start or end. It's all sort of flowing and in and out of their bodies. And so, yeah, it kind of is about returning to this imaginary world where, you know, we can gaze upon nature and these different interactions with women in a vacuum, I guess.
Mm-hmm. And are these, I'm assuming these are ideas that you had before, you know, having your son and becoming a mother, and but I guess the idea also of women, you know, encompasses everything beyond that and beyond childbirth and even being able to give birth. But is the title for this exhibition one that you've used in the past?
No, but I think it encompasses that sort of existing and reflecting in nature and standing in front of the sublime nature and also the sort of, I guess, minute aspects. So even the scale of it is kind of goes in and out of being like this creature in the forest, in the wood, or standing before something grand. And it's all in just ways that it's hard to articulate. Yeah.
No, it makes sense. And I find the women in your work extremely hopeful. Was that your intention when you?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think they exist in this sort of powerful space where they sort of exist outside of the male gaze. So they have that sort of agency and sorry, I'm a little nervous. Yes, so they have their own agency.
No, and you can feel that, and it's interesting because, of course, when I saw the exhibition, I mean, you can't control your environment, where you are in the world when you see something and when you experience art. So, of course, you know, when you're looking at it, we're all living in this new kind of reality, I guess. But do you think that, I guess, the context of the work has changed now, and is that something that you do think about now that you've put out this exhibition, you know, post the pandemic beginning? And how did you think about, I guess, when you put this exhibition together? Oh, if people would kind of see it differently than had you put it out, I guess, in like December, for example.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the feelings from the pandemic that have surfaced are surrounding like isolation and, you know, our search for connectivity during this era of social distancing. Like a lot of that permeates in this work in terms of looking at it through this new lens. Yeah, so just
Absolutely.
ideas of wanting to interact with people, and a lot of the images, I think some of the images in the show are about these sort of tensions and experiences, fraught experiences or joyful experiences between women and or just in other outside relationships in general. So there's some with like sort of two bodies tussling, and quite a few where the figure is sort of standing looking out yonder into the abyss, and a lot of those feelings are sort of captured in the lens of the times that we are in. And I mean, a lot of that is also the search for, I guess, nature, now that we're all stuck in these urban environments. And I'm, for one, haven't been north of Richmond Street beyond my neighborhood by the waterfront in pretty much 90 days. So it's strange. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. When I first saw them, I mean, what I noticed, you know, and of course, and we can talk about this, but the idea that we're seeing them digitally in the first place is, that would even be like another reason that this is different, of course, than had we seen them pre-pandemic, I'm sure. But this idea that the creatures literally do feel trapped, or that they're in these frames, that I know you told me that you handmade, that you made all these frames, and they're all, yeah, which are so beautiful. But then the flip side of that, which as I spent more time with the work, is of course is that, you know, I want into their world, and I think that, you know, they're so powerful for that reason, and they do provide this kind of escape, I'd say. So I guess, did you have any hesitations about showing this work online, knowing that your work is so detailed and intricate, you know?
I mean, we've talked about it before, but just, you know, the experience of any sort of work that someone is creating in these dimensions with all these different materials, like whether it's sort of a straight drawing or a painting, like there's a certain, I guess, luster to it that you can't, and texture and all these other things that can't be absorbed digitally, but it's the best we have, and it just speaks to the fact that, you know, I think I mentioned that real life is just better.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, but beyond that, like the digital realm does offer different ways to disseminate work. So that's one of the positives that have come out from this, is that I think we're going to all develop new ways of working that, I guess, accessibility and inclusivity of being able to view something at home is part of it. I saw this doorknob jitter in a voice screen, so.
Oh. Yeah, absolutely. And even like, I mean, I don't know who's they're watching right now, but the idea that, you know, we can have an audience from potentially all over the world, and more people can view your work. And so I think that definitely is, you know, a positive that can come out of this. So, and just even rethinking, yeah, spaces and accessibility, absolutely. So that's interesting. And I know we did talk about this a bit, but have you been thinking about your role as an artist during this time, and has that changed at all?
I mean, I think it hasn't changed, because I've always seen the role as the artist as sort of, you know, observing and interpreting the world around them through their lens. So through my particular experience, like, I mean, it hasn't changed, and it's still as pressing to create something that comes from, I don't know, I guess the heart, or with lack of a better word. Yeah, I think it's all about capturing these little pockets of individual experiences, and however that comes.
No, absolutely. And I guess, I know that you said that, you know, you said that parenting itself is a creative act. Absolutely. And I think that that's a really interesting idea. And, you know, you have your art practice, and then you have your child, and these are both, you know, creations of yourself. And have you had any time, I guess, since we've spoken, though, I guess, like, do you catch yourself? This is what I wanted to ask you this last time, like, you know, doing sketches, or kind of like having new ideas that you, for projects, or going in different directions that surprise you?
During the pandemic, no. Like, I think given what's happened in the last few weeks with the Black Lives Matters protests, just, you know, trying to absorb all, I guess, the anti-racist literature, and just knowing the gaps in my own education and where my place is as a woman of color, as an ally. I just don't feel as pressing to create the work that I want to create. And I think it'll come when it comes. And, you know, being a parent is the adaptation of, you know, a lack of time in so many ways. And right now the focus is to just exist and absorb and be present with the little person that needs me the most. But it's hard, because parenting, again, like, and artwork are these two loves, and there is a possibility to do both simultaneously, but you can always do one better than the other. And obviously my son takes precedence over the studio. But yeah, they're both entirely absorbing gestures of care. So
yeah. Well, and that's even beyond everything else we're talking about. And I think exactly how you said it is, taking a step back and wondering how we can be allies right now and how we can do better and think about, our everyday actions. And yeah, it does feel, I asked you that question knowing it does feel like a strange time to kind of be doing anything in a way.
I mean, there's a level of, guilt, I guess, because there are pressing actions that need to be taken, just a whole journey of self-learning as well. And I mean, that happens simultaneously just in art practice outside of the pandemic, outside of these movements. You're always absorbing and researching whatever it is. Just this time it's very affected by what's going on and sort of the cultural climate.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's positive in the end.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think then that does make the role of the artist, so vital. I guess in terms of Wimmin Who Wander, what was your process of research for that? I guess you did talk about going to some residencies and physically taking in nature. Is that?
Yeah, I mean, so for me, Wimmin Who Wander, it's exploring these sorts of new environments and immersing myself in the act of sort of creating all these impressions from nature. So a lot of the botanical elements aren't directly, they're not direct from observation, but they're sort of taking very familiar forms and they're meshing them with the body and with the botanical so that they become this sort of third strange but familiar thing, and then sort of weaving them in and across these landscapes. Sorry, remind me what the
No. I'm just curious if we can talk about like specifically. You mentioned some residencies. Like where were they?
Of course. So I got immersed in that. So the Wimmin Who Wander definitely echoes my own sort of travels and sort of need for escape beyond the studio, because the studio is this sort of intense but very local work environment, and you sort of I hit a ceiling of, I guess, inspiration, and for me, lived experience is sort of what really influences the color and the life in the work, and that's really at the bulk of it what it is, because I've always worked with these sort of figures that I've suspended in environments, and so been to quite a number of residencies, but most recently was in Gotland, Sweden at Bristol.
Oh, wow.
So that was last summer, and so a lot of, I think because that's the most recent, a lot of those sort of experiences have gone there, just sort of taking walks along the seaside and exploring these spaces alone. Even though I traveled with my family, like just taking those moments by myself to distill that into the studio was sort of where those come from.
Yeah, and I mean, I feel like especially now, just the thought of you right now in Sweden, you know what I mean? Like these ideas of being other places is so
impossible. That part is the alternative reality.
Yeah, but it's amazing to think that you could bring in like foliage and flora from Sweden or wherever into these works, but then they seem like they're all new.
I think because they're not so specific to the space, but more sort of impressions and ways to tell stories of both personal and more, I guess, universal sort of stories and narratives of women's experiences.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Do you have, I know you said you lived in an apartment downtown?
I live in an apartment now, yeah.
Do you have a lot of plants yourself?
I'm in the process of like slowly accumulating more and more. Just the nature of living in Toronto up until this year, I've been jumping sublet to sublet. So this is a very permanent home for us. Our name is on the lease, so we're actually in, the big process of doing what everyone else is doing, baking bread and figuring out how to put our home together, redecorate, all those really mundane but delightful tasks that you don't usually have time to do otherwise. But yeah, like trying to bring it into my space has been very uplifting, living in a concrete box.
We need to find those things. And do you have a studio outside of your home?
I do. So I do have a studio I work with another artist, Chris Knight, who does beautiful paintings of queer men and also beautiful scenery. So during the pandemic, because I'm the one who's not going in and working, I've had to just not go in, I guess.
No.
But I'm there.
Yeah. No, that's great. I guess, is there anything else about your exhibition that you want to talk about, even the way that you, I guess, curated it into the 2 series, or I guess it just reflects the different works. We have the dioramas and then the studies. I did like about how the studies were, though you could use them literally as studies and it's in the name, for other artworks, they were themselves artworks. Like, would you normally hang those, I guess, in a gallery?
I do. And for me, it speaks to kind of more the scale and how I'm able to work. Like, a lot of the paper cuts really have come about as a way to work in a more, I guess, playful manner. Because when I was doing my larger drawings, they were very well developed with studies, but the act of creating those were more like straightforward. Like, I had a vision of what they would be, whereas the cut paper works, I'm sort of creating all these different elements as I'm traveling. So I'm traveling with like boxes of botanicals and odds and ends and, different figures that I'm not quite assembling until I return to my home studio. And that's another adaptation of, being mobile and abroad, which again is in great contrast to how I'm working now, or not working at all, but not traveling. So yeah, what were we saying?
Oh no, I just wanted to think about like even the idea of like curating an online exhibition versus. Oh yeah, I guess
for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, yes, the combination of the dioramas and the studies. The studies are just these like very playful, quick things, but they're also still very detailed, and they essentially start as a springboard for me to capture some of the narratives that have been going around in my head and combinations of things that, I want to put down quickly. So it does act as a sketch, but, they get built upon until they become this shadow box diorama in the other exhibition. And yeah.
Which are so complex. And I think that is probably, I don't know if we can fully appreciate them online, like how much detail and but I think it's important when people do look at them to realize that how many layers are involved, and the fact that they wouldn't be like completely flat when you look at them. And I think it's, but it also does translate well. So it's this interesting idea of, what do you, there's lots to gain in those, I guess, when you go online, and but we're all adapting, so that's good. Absolutely.
We're all going to invest in very good documentation after this, since you never know. This might be one of the outlets. But yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do think it's, oh, sorry, I think my age.
No.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there.
No,
there may have been a bit of a lag on my end.
Yeah. You're all right.
Okay. No, but it will be interesting, I think, to see in this idea that, just, you did just say you're not working right now. Well, that's not actually true. You're a mom and you are working, and I'm sure you're working harder than a lot of us right now. But to focus on this idea that you are taking in. So it will be really exciting to see, I think, what you do create after this, whatever after this looks like. I think that's also
and I'm excited as well. Like, obviously, I'm definitely aching to get back in the motion. Like the muscle memory is there. Like I feel the inclination to do it, but there are so many small, mundane reasons why it's physically not possible in the space that I'm in. And that's just one of those restrictive realities to being an artist, being young, living in a city during a pandemic. So.
For sure. But I like that you said that you're excited. And I think there's a lot of hope that we can look for, and there's a lot of hope in your work. And I think it's a pleasure, for audiences to look at your work and to be able to see this online right now and have this to come to. And so thank you for that. Is there anything that you want to add before we finish up?
No, but thank you for speaking with me. And of course, thank you for everyone who's making spaces like this during this time as a means to, keep momentum going and give, I guess, a platform for artists to do their thing. Because we need to for ourselves, because we're going to be crazy.
Absolutely. No, it's a great way to end, I think, and just for everyone else, you can keep checking back at Mirror Mirror for other exhibitions, and Winnie's show will still be up, I think, for at least a few more weeks, if not more. So definitely check it out. And thank you so much, Winnie. Yeah.
Thank you.